Whenever you're ready.
Hi there, my name's Dan Wells. I'm 88 years old, and my great grandson Braden Hamilton's going to be filming me a little bit today, and we're going to work on a knife. I'm putting a handle on a knife for a friend of mine. And during this time, we're going to start talking about some of the things that I've seen and witnessed in my 88 years on this earth. It's been a good ride. I've had several good jobs and seen a lot of things, and it's been my pleasure to have witnessed so much. I always say that I think we have lived through the greatest of times in all of history, because we've seen so much development and changes in everything that you want to witness. But anyway, I'm going to work on this knife some and doing some BSing while we're doing that. This friend of mine, he sent me this knife blade, and he wants the knife to be done like this, where it has the handle on it and the turquoise pins on it. And so I've got the handle. I made two sets of handles. I made these first, and he didn't care much for the color, so I made these. And I glued it with epoxy. Going to take the clamps off, and this is what we start with. You got staghorn here, and then these hollow tubes, 1/4 inch. We're going to put turquoise on them after we get them all finished up. And of course the blade is taped in case something happens. You don't want to get cut. So anyway, I don't know how we're going to work this. I need to be walking around doing some things.
I'll just follow you around.
Okay.
You can make it work.
I think the first thing I'll do is go over to the bandsaw and saw these off, and then we'll start from there.
Sounds good. I'll follow you.
Yeah. I use canes or some kind of a walker everywhere I go. Okay, this is a metal cutting blade. I'm just going to cut these pins off to start with. Okay, we've got those cut off. Now I need to go over to the sander and do some sanding to kind of shape the handle. And hopefully I don't grind too far down and get into the metal. Sure don't want to ruin this fella's knife. This is going to be noisy for a while now, so you'll have to bear with me. You can't smell it on the film, but it has a strong odor too. time I shape it up, it's not gonna be much left. Okay, this is about as far as I better go right here. I'm gonna have to do a lot of handiwork, but I need to tape off both of these two metal pieces. Otherwise, I might hit them with the sander or file and mess them up. So let's go back over there. Now we got one of Braden's favorites going by, a train.
Yeah.
Let me pick up some stuff here to work with. I failed to mention a while ago, I'm married to Patty Wells. She's 86 years old, and come May the 15th, we'll be married 70 years. And in order to be married that long, you got to start young. So most people know our story. We ran off and got married. I was 18 and a half, she was 16, just barely. Her dad wouldn't let us date, so we showed him. And he said, or they all felt like this marriage is not going to last. But I think we were so bullheaded, we thought we're not going to let what everybody else thinks. We're going to do what we think, and it's lasted these 70 years, so done pretty good. God's been good to us. We both in pretty good health for our age. I'm expecting to go to 90 at least and still be productive. I do as good a job now as I have in the past, but I just don't get around as good. And my shop shows that I cannot get around, but I just have one hand, and it's hard to carry things from one place to another when you're one-handed, so I don't even try. I just come down here and work and stay productive. In this shop, we can do the knives. I can make knife blades, leathercraft, which is one of my main hobbies that I've been doing since 1955. I do pyrography, which is portraits in wood, or, well, whatever medium. I can do it in leather. Let me grab a piece over here that I've done. I carved in steel using carbide tip bits. This is relatively hard to do. Probably not a lot of people would even want to attempt it. I got about 8 or 9 hours in it, and it's steel plating and the Celtic cross carved with tungsten carbide cutters. Anyway, I've also got a tumbler in there that I'm fixing for one of our dear pastors that we had here years ago, Stan Cosby. But anyway, that's the things we do. Let's see, what else do we do?
Oh, jewelry.
Yeah, I've made jewelry since 1987. Probably over 1,000 pieces.
I got my ring right here that I wear daily.
Braden has the ring. I'm guessing, but I figure maybe 1,000 pieces, because we were really busy making it when we first started, and of course working, everybody wanted something made. So, and then also I can show you in the other room the little wooden crosses, inlay them with semi-precious stones. Since we do jewelry, then we have the semi-precious stones like turquoise and lapis and all the different colors. I have made, I think it's 443 writing pens now. My goal is to do 500. I've still got some to do. I have several pen kits here that I need to use up. Soap. Been making bars of soap since 2015. The other day I was looking, I've made 62 batches, so 62 times 12. So there's been several bars of soap that's been made. But just people send me stuff that other people don't want to tackle. Right now I'm working on we'll go on a Bible cover for a family member, and this has different meanings, and I won't say what it is, but what we're saying here is one scripture, one king, and it has other meanings, but like I say, I'm not going to cover that here. I've already made a Bible cover for a granddaughter, and then this is for her husband. So, and I've made Braden one, and I don't know how many I've made. Several different Bible covers. This is an interesting knife. This blade was purchased, and then this piece of wood came from Clarion, Oklahoma. And we were up there buying some knives, and these people mentioned that they had some boat arc that had a green cast to it. And so they gave me this piece. It had been in the pond, and we think that the algae in the pond had made it this yellowish green color, because it's normally yellow. And I wanted something different here on the bolster, so I happened to look up and I saw this piece of India stag, and I thought, well, that'll be neat on here, so that's what I put on this knife. And then, of course, filled the hollow tubes here with a semi-precious stone that looks like Criscola. It's kind of a green color. This is an ostrich leg, piece of ostrich leg, and so this knife here is just kind of different all the way around. It's fun to work on them, and anyway, we start looking back my lifetime. I've helped or been there. I didn't help when my aunt and uncle moved. It wasn't a big long distance they moved, but it was in a horse-drawn wagon. You know, this kid was sitting on top of some of the stuff that was moved, probably the bedding or whatever, and going around along the road and waving at people. There weren't that many that day in that area, in that location. But I've gone from horse-drawn buggies, and we now drive a Tesla. So you can see we've gone a long ways. I've had several cars and kicked myself for letting them go, but that's the way life is. You look back and you wish you had done this, you wish you had done that, but either at the time it wasn't a good idea, or you didn't have the money to do it, or there was some reason why you couldn't. We talk now about, oh my goodness, since gold's close to $5,000 an ounce now. When we were young, it was $35 an ounce. So we look back and say, oh my goodness, we should have bought gold. Well, we should have. Should have bought land. Land's 10 or 15,000 an acre around in our area down at Calera, where the Choctaws have casinos. Land sells by the foot. Mm-hmm. And I'm sure the foot price is more than what we would have paid for an acre. But there again, shoulda, coulda. Had a real neat 1936 Plymouth 2-door coupe, overdrive. It was a straight 8, and had a radio in it, overdrive, rumble seat. It was just a beautiful little car. We gave $90 for it. Kept it for a while, decided we wanted another vehicle, so we traded in, got $90 back on it, and bought a silly DeSoto, which had the push button shift on the dash, and that thing lasted about a year, and then the transmission went out, so we had to scrap it. But anyway, then we bought, this may or may not be of that much interest, but we bought a 1960 Falcon when they first came out in 1959, and we lived in Wichita, Kansas. We bought the 13th Falcon that was sold in Wichita, Kansas. It cost $2,500. No radio, no air conditioner, but we had a new car. Anyway, had it for several years and sold it, I think, for $250. Kicked myself 100 times for selling it because it was still a nice little vehicle. But there's a story about the Falcon and the radio that's in it. I worked at Safeway stores, and I had to go in early in the mornings, 3 or 4 o'clock, to help either clean the floor or set up the bread rack or do produce. Anyway, I was parked and was headed into the store, and I heard this radio playing. And I thought, well, that's strange. And I kept hearing it, and I walked over, and laying in the bushes there was this little transistor radio. Got to listen to it, and there was a local radio station that had placed these over different places in Wichita, Kansas. And I found one. And that was the radio we used in the Falcon. Well, we'd gone home to visit my parents, which was a 5-hour drive, and we were coming back to Wichita, and I don't know where we got. That radio wouldn't pick up too far, but we heard on there that this young child had drowned in the Arkansas River, and they were searching for the body, and they finally kept insisting, and the family gave the name of this child. It was my brother's son. Anyway, we had just apparently left my folks' house because they almost beat us back to Wichita. It was 3 months before they found this boy's body. And what had happened, he had on some new galoshes or overshoes, whatever you want to call them. He and his little buddy, he was 9 years old. He and his little buddy were out stomping mud holes, and they went up to what was called the Arkansas, they called it Arkansas River, we called it Arkansas, and it was overflowing or flowing real deep and had ice chunks in it. And Gary was stomping these mud holes, and he stomped in a hole where they'd drilled down to put a pylon in there, concrete to support a bridge. Well, when he did, it just sucked him right in, and out and down the river, and it was over 3 months. It was the largest hunting for anybody in Wichita, Kansas history at that time. They had helicopters out, and I don't know how many people, but my brother was there on that riverbank every day for 3 months, and they finally found his body. But it was quite an experience. But anyway, that little transistor radio on the Falcon is how we heard about it. But anyway, you talk about technology. We've gone through no phone. Well, the phones that hang on the wall, and you do 1 ring, 2 rings, and everybody on the party line would pick up, and they'd know who you was talking to, and everybody would join in and hidey and whatever. In fact, I still have one of those old phones. And then we went to the bag phones, and then got into the different phones. And of course, you all know what we have today. My iPhone can do more than the phones that launched the moon launches. So I've seen that much in technology. And I remember my first handheld calculator. It was so nice. It was fairly large. It was probably about 5 by 4 or whatever, and it was 8 digits, and they were red. Out in the sun, you couldn't see it. You had to be in where it was kind of dark to even read it. But we thought it was so great that we could add, subtract, multiply, and divide on that little 8-digit calculator. In fact, I used to have one. I don't know where it would be now, but then you can see where we've come in that field. On my phone's got the scientific calculators, and just on and on, whatever you need. Or you can ask Grok or chat or whatever and find out instantly almost what's going on. And that's the technology I've seen. And you think about flying aircraft. It almost goes back to the Wright brothers. I mean, you go back to 88 years and see where it is. I wouldn't know offhand, but I know it's came from a long ways. In fact, my dad-in-law had a little Funk, F-U-N-K, little single engine plane, and he'd take us up in that thing. The funny thing about it, we lived at Wichita, Kansas, and that's where Boeing aircraft was. And his name was Barney. He came to see us one time. We lived at Derby, Kansas. And he got up there, and all these planes were going each direction around him. And he got scared, and he landed on Boeing's airport. And boy, here they came. And they got all over him and told him to get that thing off this airstrip. Anyway, he finally got it off, and I think he went somewhere in Derby, Kansas, and landed it. But just a lot of different experiences. And of course, backing up, but he really didn't care for me as far as running off with his daughter. A funny story, I've got it hanging on the wall over here, a little 4-inch crescent wrench. Braden might can find it.
Maybe.
But anyway, my brother-in-law likes to tell the story that his dad, that was a 10-inch crescent, and he carried it in his back pocket till it worn down to a 4-inch because he wanted to beat the hell out of me. But anyway, it was a funny story. He finally ended up, he loved me as much as he did his own children, so it turned out good. So.
There's a lot of them over here. I don't know.
Yeah, it's not over there. But anyhow, other stories. My dad used to tell these little stories all the time. He'd get so tickled. He'd tell a little joke, and then his whole body would shake. He had so much fun telling stories. I can tell a few of them, but on here, some of them I can't. But he told about this little boy that came to school, and he was late one morning, and the teacher said, "Well, Johnny, I see you're a little behind this morning." He said, "I know, teacher, but if I'd have had another safety pin, you wouldn't be able to." And they were making up stories in school, and came little Johnny's time, and the teacher said, "I want you to make up a little sentence using Rotterdam." And he looked around and he said, "Teacher, if Susie over there doesn't quit eating that candy, she's going to rot her damn teeth out." So it's just little tales like that. He would get so tickled. But my dad was quite a person. He didn't have the talent that I did. He painted our bathroom one time a real pretty green while Mother was gone, and of course that didn't go over very big. He worked for Continental Oil Company, and their colors were red and green and black and silver, and he used the green to cover the bathroom, which was not appropriate. Dating back in the automobile industry, Daddy had, back then, he would buy either a Model A or a Model T, and that's what he used for a lease car. He could buy them for $50 to $75 a piece, and he would drive them until they was not usable, and then he'd pull them down the field and park them. And when I left home, there was 2 or 3 of them down in the pasture just rusting, and I've again kicked myself several times because I wished we had the things. It's hard telling what they'd be worth now. But I went down at the barn one day, and Dad was working on his lease car, and he had a bucket of black paint and a broom, and he was painting it. And the way you adjust the toe in and whatever on them, he'd take the broom handle and he'd measure the distance between the tires at the front, and then he'd measure at the back, and you get them equal, and that's how he adjusted the toe in on them. But they were fun to drive. It's a good time, and I can remember going to see my aunt and uncle, and it was muddy. The roads back then, we didn't have gravel, we didn't have blacktop or concrete, but just old muddy roads, and it had been raining, and of course it had ruts in the road. The thing slipped off in the ditch, and we finally were able to get it out. And the tires were real narrow. they looked like they weren't over that wide, and then some of them had wooden spokes. I don't think ours did, but anyway, we had a vehicle like that, and I can remember a 28 Ford, and then a 35 model Ford, and then went to a 48, and then Dad had a, let's see, it was a 1958 Ford Fairlane with the Interceptor engine in it, and I loved to drive that sucker because that was a highway patrol type engine. And we still lived at Wichita, and it's 5 hours, and they just opened up I-35 all the way. Well, my wife and my mother went on a trip down to Brownville, Texas, and I got to drive the 58. And I was coming in and up around when I got on 35. I'd wait, a car would come up to pass me, and I'd wait till they come up there. Back then, you didn't have any detection of radar. The cop would follow you so far, and then he'd turn on his lights if you were speeding. So I'd let it just slow down till they got up even with me. If it wasn't a cop, I'd gun it and just take off, and that sucker would hit 100 miles an hour really quick. And talking about cars, my brother was a car fanatic. And he had these Buicks. This one that we loved so much, it was a Roadmaster. It was black with red leather interior with a Continental kit, convertible. Well, Patty and I, when Junior would come in, that was his Raymond Wells Jr., when he would come in, he'd let us take the Buick. And there was a little town at Hilton, about 20 miles from where we lived. We'd take that sucker and go to Hilton and drag Maine. Well, in the wintertime, we'd roll up the windows and turn the heater on, and we'd still have the top down. We'd drive back and forth. But those Buicks would get up about 120, 130. He had one, it was a Buick Century, I forget the year, but it was kind of a seafoam color, and it had a Continental kit. And I remember driving it. But it would get up and scoot too. But of course our Tesla now will outrun either one of what they would do back then. But we were in hog heaven every time Junior would come in. He would come in and he had financial problems. I'm telling family secrets. And he'd go to lease with my dad, and my dad always had money with him. $300, $400 or $500, whatever. Well, anyway, Junior would come down, he needed money, so Dad would give him money. But Junior was not the type child that I was. He was really a pain in the rear. I can remember my dad having him by the nape of the neck, and they were going in circles, and Daddy was kicking his rear end. But what had happened, the neighbor grew watermelons, and we got a train going by.
I'm going to swap out the battery real quick. It's getting a little low.
Yeah.
Whenever you're ready.
Okay, our neighbor grew watermelons, and he always entered the county fair every year and tried to win the largest melon. Well, anyway, he had this melon, black. It wasn't a black diamond, it was a striped melon. I forget what they were, but anyway, he had it covered up with hay and was letting it grow to get as large as it could for the fair. Well, come to find out, this melon disappeared, or it was broken and the heart was eaten out of it. And they got to looking around, and here's these horse tracks. And my brother rode an old white female horse with big hoofs on her, and so they knew it was Junior that had been there. And that's when my dad grabbed him and was kicking his rear. But he was 10 years older than I am, so I didn't get this. We didn't have a close relationship at that time. But he went off. He lied about his age. He joined the military when he was 16, and got in on the tail end of World War II. But he was a good-looking sucker. He's dark-complected, and we had a lot of fun. He was a good guy, and he's the one that helped us to move to Wichita, Kansas. And that's another story. When I graduated from Fox High School, I got a scholarship for Southeastern State University, SSU. Okay, it was $251 for books, tuitions, and I don't think it had lodging, but it's a full ride at Southeastern, 2 semesters.
I wish it was that cheap.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So anyway, we came down here, and I was fortunate. I got a job for $1.25 an hour, helping build the local gym, which was the Bloomer Sullivan Gymnasium, and got to work almost both semesters the whole time, and made $1.25 an hour. Well, that was enough money. We thought we had plenty of money, so we bought a used trailer house, and Dad and Mom had given me a '51 Ford for graduation. Well, come the next year, we came down to try to find a job, so go to Southeastern, and of course then we was going to have to pay the tuition and everything. Well, at that time, they were paying the grocery stores and the different stores around were paying either 50 or 75 cents an hour. And of course we thought we can't exist on that, so my brother was home from Wichita, and he said, if you'll come to Wichita, Kansas, I can get you a job at Safeway for at least $1. And that sounded good, so we took off, and it took us 13 hours to pull that darn trailer behind that Ford to get to Wichita. I don't know how many vehicles we ran off the road, because if I'd get to going over about 30 miles an hour, that trailer just rocked back and forth. So anyway, we made it, and I got to work for Safeway for $1 an hour, and spent about 5 years there. And they got to talking about me either being an assistant manager or a produce manager, and I was working by the hour, making $3.90 a month, and I knew if I got promoted to those levels, then they was going to just work the heck out of me, because I'd be salaried at that point, and we didn't want that. So got to checking around, and Bill Grimes, which is one of our teachers from high school, was at Southeastern, and we talked to Bill, and he said, why don't you come down to Southeastern and go to school? Well, he and the dean at the time knew we were out of state, but we told this little story that we were in state. So I got to go back to Southeastern. Of course, Patty, she'd only finished the 10th grade, and they really didn't want her in the local schools because she was a married woman and had children, and they didn't care for that at that time. So anyway, she was able to get enrolled at Southeastern as a special student, and of course she made straight A's and everything. This was the help of Bill Grimes, and so she got in as a special student, and then she finished up and has a master's degree. And I have a BS, Bachelor of Science degree, and mine's in chemistry. I have a double major, chemistry and math, and a physics minor. And when I graduated, I thought, here I am, world, just come and get me. And I had a stack of letters that they sent back to me. No, we don't need you. And just no matter what I did, I couldn't find a job. And there was a place over at Ardmore, Oklahoma. It's called the Samuel Robert Noble Foundation. So I finally got on over there, and I made $400 a month. I got a $10 a month increase in salary, but I had a job. So anyway, I did cancer research for about 5 years, and one of the guys that worked at Safeway, I helped him. He worked at Safeway in Denison, Texas. I helped him with chemistry and whatever through school, and he knew me, and I'd get letters from him, hey Dan, you need to come and work at Safeway. And I thought, no, I'm so dang tired of Safeway. I don't want to work for Safeway. Well, finally, they kept hounding me, and they offered me, well, what I did, I went over and had an interview, and they offered me $200 a month more than what we were making at the time. And so at that time, I went over to Safeway, and that was October '69. and made that switch or that change, and that's where I ended up retiring from, was Safeway, and I had several jobs there. When I worked at the Noble Foundation, I had an interest in safety, and so I'd put out these little bulletins on safety about every 2 weeks. Well, when I went to work at Safeway, I was hired as a special chemist to do special projects. I wasn't hired to work in the lab because I told them I didn't want to work in the lab and just do the same thing over and over. And so they hired me as a special chemist. At that time, they had more money than they knew what to do with, so they hired me. And of course, my first job I had was to write up a study of what they did, what they called the hardening department, where they hardened the oil to make shortening and butter, margarine and whatever. But anyway, got a good report and walked along there and doing different projects, and OSHA came into being. Well, since I'd expressed an interest in safety, they put me in the engineering department and made me a safety engineer. Well, that rocked on OSHA, and I'd learned that whole darn OSHA book. It wasn't but about half-inch thick at that time, and I could tell you I could walk up to a ladder and tell you what the specs were, and just on and on, because I studied and studied it. Well, of course, when I left, it was 2 discs on a computer, and there was no way in heck to learn it. But anyway, we used edible oil refinery, so we had our wastewater had oil and stuff in it, and it was creating problems for the city. And about that time, they were wanting the regulations written through the environmental people, the regulations for edible oil industry. So me and my boss started working on that, and as a result, they made me an environmental engineer. So that's how I got the title of being a safety and environmental engineer. There were only 2 environmental engineers in Safeway, and I was one of them. But anyway, that was neat because we got to go to different places. I've been to, when I worked at the Noble Foundation, we'd go to New Orleans and places like that, and they'd have the whole conventions where you talk about what you do. And I studied cancer in rats, and studied the different cells and what would happen if you could. The liver's the only thing, and I'm skipping around, but the liver's the only organ in the body. You can remove it, half of it, and it'll grow back, and that's what we've studied on the rats. I'd open up a rat and cut out half the liver and sew it back up, and studied cancer and how that affected them. And sometimes you just cut them open and sew them back up, and that was called the study. That was what they call it. Anyway, that was your test. He'd undergone surgery, but you didn't remove his liver. But anyway, I studied the Jensen tumors. But I backed up on that. But then in Safeway, being a safety environmental engineer, we got to go to a lot of places, and D.C. and Chicago and New Orleans and whatever. But we finally got the regulations written for the standard for the edible oil industry, and that was exciting. But then in '93, Safeway was bought out, and there was a company trying to buy them, and we had what they called a white knight that came in and bought Safeway, and kept them from having the name changed and losing and everything. So they sold all the overseas operations, and then everything east of the Mississippi, for sure, even farther than that. But at that point, after that, I was, since they'd closed down a lot of the stuff, they'd sold the refinery, and I went back over to what was the engineering department and finished products plant, and I was still over the wastewater there, and I eventually was hired into quality assurance department, and at that point I was working with 4 type dressings and peanut butter, doing standards and comparing. Safeway picks the number one product. Say, I think it was Skippy peanut butter. That's the one they wanted to match. And so I'd have to take and buy Skippy and measure all the nuts in it to see how many chunks of peanuts was in it and the salt and just on and on. We tried to make a product that matched that. And while I was there, well, they wanted to match for paste salsa. And I never did get it just right, but they did get a formula that was satisfactory for them to produce. So my salsa formula was produced by Safeway stores. And also I come up with a fat-free salad dressing. Trying to think. But anyway, it's one that they manufactured too also. So some of my stuff was sold at Safeway stores, things that I had developed. And then in '93, of course, we'd come in the mornings, we'd sit in the coffee shop and visit for a while before we started work. Well, my boss came to the door and he said, "Dan, can I see you in my office?" And I said, "Yes, sir." So I went back and he closed the door. And he basically said, "You're fired." No, he didn't put it that way. He was very, felt bad about it. There were 300 of us in quality assurance that were laid off that day. And our department had gone down to the point where we had our guy that was the head of it, David Lawrence, he was the manager, and then the secretary, and then me and the boy that had hired me, Bobby Corner. So I was the one that was laid off. But at that point I was over 55 and I'd always been in profit sharing, so I was able to get at least over 50% of what money we had in profit sharing. So Safeway treated me right, and we went to church with Donis and Glenn Potter that owned J.C. Potter Sausage. Well, when Glenn found out that I was laid off, well, he started talking to me. So within 2 weeks, I'd gone to work for Potter Sausage. And I was a chemist and involved with safety, and then they had problems with water. They had water wells, but they had sulfides in them. And I'd worked with the guy over at Safeway, and so he and I, working together, had put in a treatment plant so we could get the sulfides out of the wastewater, out of fresh water, and have our own wells. So I worked there for 7 years, and Potter sold. And the first day that the new company took over, they fired the guy that's the vice president of Potter's. Well, at that point, they gave it to me. And the next day, they fired Glenn and Donis's brother-in-law, and he was in charge of what safety we had. So they threw that on me. So I had both of their jobs that I had to take to be responsible for. So the USDA guy came to me and he said, "Hey, Dan, we got 6 lines back there that the labels are wrong, and if those labels aren't changed, we're going to have to shut them down and quit manufacturing." And I didn't know anything about labels, but they gave me the name of a guy in Washington, D.C., so contacted him, and with his help and working on it, we was able to keep the lines running and had the labels changed. So that worked out fine. And of course, Donis and Glenn were real proud of that. But I worked there for, like I said, about 7 years, and I was 61. And after they'd put all that on me, and they didn't really give me a raise, I think it was $30 a month to take over all that responsibility. Well, we talked about it, and like I said, I was 61 years old and was going to, take Social Security at 62 anyway. So it was kind of funny. I had an office, and the plant manager, he and I were good buddies. But to get to his office, he walked through mine. And I had taken Potter's pictures down when I first got into that office, and what I did, I'd take and I'd put up my pictures and things that I'd done. So what I did, daily I'd change out pictures and put their stuff back up. And of course, he never noticed it. And came time for me to quit. I talked to the USDA guy and told him what I was going to do. And the big boss is gone. He was gone on some trip, I don't know where. And I walked into my plant manager's office and I said, hey, I want to take off 2 weeks vacation. And I've got, I think that they hired a guy to take my place. And I said, I think so-and-so's trained. And I'm giving you my notice. I won't be back. Anyway, that's how I left Potter's. And when the guy that was the big plant manager at that time, when he came back, well, he was upset that I'd left. And he came out and talked to me, and I got the recording. I knew he was coming out, so I recorded all of it. I've got it somewhere. But he said, if I'd have been there, you wouldn't have left, I know. Anyway, that's how I retired, and I tell people I never look back. I have enjoyed retirement for all these years, and just it's given me the opportunity to do the many things that I do, and I love every minute of it. And I think I've been very productive. I get as much enjoyment, probably more, of making stuff and giving it to people than I do actually selling it. In fact, I've just quit. I told them I didn't want my business license anymore because I don't make stuff and sell it. I just give it away. But anyway, things I've seen, I've talked about the different technologies and whatever. Thank the Lord, I'm sharp enough that I can enjoy the technology, and I really appreciate being able to do that. We have friends that they're scared of their telephones. They won't do anything but talk on them. And they've got flip phones and everything, but I don't do everything on the phone, but I do enough to get me by, and it's been really, really, really great.
I will say, you're the only 88-year-old man I know that uses Facebook and Instagram regularly.
Oh, really?
Yeah, it's really funny. I know a lot of people who are in their late 60s and 70s who don't even work their phones, And so, as an 88-year-old, I think you're winning.
Yeah, and then I have a friend, he's 68 years old, and when he first saw the Tesla, well, I said, well, let's go for a ride. And there's a road over here, we call it 3 Mile Road, and it's twisty turning to get to it. And of course the car, it just drives and stays right in the center lane, or where it's supposed to. And then when I got over there, then coming back, I what we call launched it, and it'll do 0 to 60 in 4 seconds. And of course it just pins you to the seat. But anyway, we got about halfway back, and he said, Dan, I'm 68 years old. And he said, this car just absolutely amazes me. But I'll tell you what amazes me more, is that an 88-year-old man would buy one of them. And so some people think we're crazy. Others think, my goodness, that's such a good deal. And my parents thought, that's what a guy told me just a little bit earlier today. He said, this is what my mom needs, but she couldn't communicate with the car and through the phone and everything. So it's good that we can keep up with it well enough and just get in it and say, hey, take me to such and such. And of course the car's, it's smart enough, it's learning. It knows on Saturdays that we go to IHOP and have breakfast, and when Saturday morning when I get in it, it's got IHOP under navigation. It knows that I'm going to go to Sunday school and where I'm going to go to church. And then, like I said, it can talk to you in any language and anything you want to talk about. But anyway, it's a great adventure, and the Lord's been good to me. I tell people that that you're old when you have a daughter that's 67 years old. She probably wouldn't want to hear this, but anyway, 3 great kids, and had problems with through life as anybody does with family, but we have a great family, a bunch of great, and thank goodness we're living, we're old enough and we're living long enough to see great grandkids like Braden and his siblings. And we're watching them grow up, and I think they're happy to be able to be around us and watch us grow. And we're growing, but we're growing older, but that's okay. That's life. And like I keep saying, the good Lord's treated us nice and good. And we're blessed. And we know we're on borrowed time, but that's okay too. I don't think about age. Age is it's just a number. It doesn't mean a thing, It depends on how you live your life and what you do, and you just take advantage of every day that you're alive. And I think we've done that. Let's see, I could go on. When we lived in Wichita, Kansas, I worked at Safeway, and I'm backing up, but when I'd get off from Safeway, I'd go by the Tandy store and work, and that's how I accumulated most of my leathercraft tools. I didn't work for a salary, but I worked for leather and tools, and I was good enough that when they'd have a new purse kit come in or something, they'd give me 2 of them, and one of them would be for me to tool to put in the store's display, and the other one would be for us to keep or whatever we wanted to do with it. And that's how I got a lot of the different things that I was able to sell. And I would sit there and do leathercraft for 8-10 hours a day and make a purse, and Patty was lacing them. So we'd turn them out, and I'm talking about the whole piece of leather being tooled, and sell it for $25. And I don't know what something like that'd be worth now, but anyway, that's the way dollar and cents were back then compared to what now. I can remember bread. When I was working the bread rack at Safeway, it was 10 loaves for $1. Bama pies were 4 for $1, 25 cents a piece. I'm talking fruit pies. Well, Patty tells the story when we lived at that village there at Southeastern going to school. I think our utilities and room and board was like $40 a month. But we lived in the Army barracks, and they only had sheetrock on one side of the wall, so our bedroom had studs showing, and the living room and kitchen had sheetrock on it. But we had a little book. I've kept our diary, or I guess it's not a diary, but it shows the money that we've spent and the monthly bills. I had one back when we were going to school, and it was just a little 3-ring binder, and I can remember her talking about having $2.50 for groceries for this particular week. But I do have record from 1965 until now of every month, different things we've paid out. And I tell people it's interesting. You look through and you got a bill to Sears, you got a bill to Montgomery Ward, you got a bill to J.C. Penney's, and then a car payment, and then of course the regular stuff. And back then, telephone and whatever was just a few dollars. It wasn't hardly anything, but you didn't make any money. So what happened, you'd see all these ones I just mentioned, and all of a sudden there'd be a payment to Durant Bank and Trust or some bank. Well, what we'd do to go to the bank, and we'd consolidate and pay all the bills off, and then we had one bill. Well, it'd rock on for a few months, and then all of a sudden you start seeing the bank payment, and then here's Sears again, and then here's Montgomery Ward. So you're back in the same old thing, and that's what happens to kids, and you can't tell them nothing. It's just going to happen. But one thing I distinctly remember, and I was so happy, but yet I was so upset when I had to change directions, but I always wanted a Kiak, I think was the name of it, reel-to-reel recorder. And boy, as soon as we went over to Noble Foundation, I was getting that $400 a month. I got one from Sears. And it was so much fun because we lived on the I Street and had in this old house, had a big long front porch on it, and I'd set up my speakers on this end and this end, not speakers but mics. And Mother and Daddy'd come, and you could hear them walking across the porch. And then play that back. It was so much fun. Well, we started getting the bills, and that thing was on the Sears payment. And thought, well, we can't afford that. So I had to give it back and eliminate that payment. But I was so wanted that thing forever, and then couldn't afford it. But again, that's life. You can get yourself in too much hot water easy enough. But the Noble Foundation was probably one of the best places I ever worked. But the salary was so bad. I mean, I went into my boss, and I think I talked to him, and I said, his name was Camp Smith, and I said, Dr. Camp Smith, we need some more money. I'm sorry, but we can't make it. And he said, well, I'll see what I can do. And he got me $30 a month more. And when he gave it to me, he said, okay, you got $30, but don't ask for another. And anyway, ended up, like I told you earlier, going to Safeway when they offered me $200 a month more. But grew up in the best of times, and then some of the roughest times, and that was not near as bad as what my parents had gone through. I mean, they lived back through the Dust Bowl days and things of that nature. My dad worked in what was called a CC camp in Perry, Oklahoma, for $1 a day, cutting down trees with a 2-man crosscut. And men were just standing there waiting for them to fall out where they could take over, for $1 a day. That was good money back then. But anyway, he managed to get through and finally got into the oil business, contracting business, and that was his job at Continental Oil. So Braden has mentioned talking about different things, possibly the Wells family and then my faith. I've always, as far as I can remember, believed in God and Jesus and gone to church. We went to the different churches when I was a little kid, and then, of course, when I was in school, high school, at Fox, we went to the Methodist church, and been a Methodist practically all of our life until just the last couple of years. But anyway, I've always felt like God put me in the right place at the right time, because what I mentioned is my career. Like whenever I was doing safety, and safety come up, and I was environmental safety engineer, and then got into wastewater, and I was environmental engineer, and just on, and it was God putting me in the different positions so I could, or my life was controlled by that. And I've mentioned that many times talking to people in Sunday school and whatever. So anyway, it's been good.
Hey, Mima.
We're,
Well, we got a video rolling.
yeah.
Oh, you do?
Yeah.
Am I in it?
Do you want to be?
I don't see me.
No, it's on the other
Yeah.
end.
Just say, point at him.
I'm sorry I interrupted.
No, you're all right.
You're fine.
What are you up to?
I'm up to 5'1".
5'1".
5'1" and ornery.
No, I didn't put that last part on there.
I did.
That's my last name.
Yeah. Yeah, we've been doing.
Oh, Dan's the one that's on the.
Yeah.
Now I'm in the picture.
Yeah.
Yeah, you're
I snuck in here.
supposed to be
Well, I'd
saying.
known that I'd have come in here and done it gracefully. Oh my goodness.
Yeah.
Well, go ahead and keep talking, Papa. You're the star.
No,
I'm the starlet.
we want you to say something too.
Yeah.
I said hello. I've already been on there. My voice anyway.
Yeah.
Anyway,
Oh, my goodness.
we were talking about that, the faith and how God's led me through all these different things and through my career. And I think Patty would say the same thing. But
But what did you say beforehand?
well, how God has led me through in my career in my lifetime. He put me in a certain position, and so that I was able to do the different things that I did. But anyway, you mentioned, or we were talking about the Wells family and Uncle Howard and all those videos that was made. There were 11 of those kids, and 7 boys and 4 girls. And I like to tell the story. My Aunt Leona talked about 4 of the girls. They were sleeping in the same bed every night, and it was on a corn chuck mattress. And she wet the bed every night. And she said, I don't know why my sister didn't just whip me because of that, but she said I peed every night. We'd have to try to dry the mattress out.
The mattress was corn shucks.
Corn chucks, yeah. It was.
You just get new corn shucks.
But anyway, it was a funny story. And then another one that was funnier, and this is on a video that they were talking about. Her dad, my granddad, would take a nap basically every afternoon, and he had a little. He bought aspirin, 12 tablets in a little metal box, real thin and just about 1.5 inches square. Well, he chewed gum all the time, and when he'd go to sleep, he'd take his gum out and put it in that little metal box. And when he'd go to sleep, my aunt would go over there and open that up, and she'd chew his gum while he was asleep. Anyway, that was some of the stories they told. But there's so much.
Kids will be kids.
Yeah.
If given the chance.
My dad told us about these. Back then, you had people traveling from one workplace to another, and they came there and was living at their house or in their area of their house by there was a stream there. It had a spring. Well, these kids had a pretty little red wagon, and so my dad and my Uncle Howard, they decided they wanted that wagon. So they swapped it and they took it down to the spring and put rocks in it and sunk it until people moved on. When they went down to get it, the sucker just rusted almost all to pieces. So that didn't work out too good. And there was another group, I don't know if it was them or not, but they were sitting around a campfire, I think. And these boys were arguing, and this one had a butcher knife, and he just took and threw it like that, and he stuck right here in the knee of his brother, and they said that knife just quivered like that. But anyway, there was all kinds of tales. My Uncle Orville, which I considered to be my favorite uncle, and he considered me to be his favorite nephew, but anyway, they said he was all dressed up to go to Sunday school or church, whatever, and he needed help getting on the horse. Well, somebody took his foot and pushed him. When it did, he went on the horse and then off and fell in a pile of cow manure. So that kind of messed up his Sunday school dress, but they would tell these little funny stories like that. It was hard times back then. My uncle said that they had pancakes that were only one-sided. They were so thin. And Dad used to tell that they'd take a piece of bacon fat and tie it on a string, let you swallow it, and then pull it back up. And that was the only taste that you got of bacon. Uncle Howard talked about gravy sandwiches that they went to school. That's what they had. And a lot of my lunches at school were egg sandwiches, mixed up with mayonnaise or whatever they had, and relish. And
why did you have eggs?
Well, we had chickens. My dad had chickens and cows and horses, and raised a garden, and some of the equipment that he used is hanging back here in the shop. But anyway, it was a different life, and of course they go back. I have records. My great-grandfather was a justice of the peace, and he was at Crescent, Oklahoma at one time. In fact, I found out later they were buried at Crescent and lived there for a few years and didn't even know it. But I've got papers of his that date back 1863, 64, whatever, that he signed, and Of course, he had to sign stuff and give out money and whatever. So, and also I have, back then they had to pay for their personal property tax, and it's fairly large sheets, and it listed cattle and cows and horses and whatever, all kinds of livestock, and then personal belongings, and I have the record where he went in and paid his personal tax, and my grandfather paid his at the same time. So, and they'd be $7, $8 for the year, you know. But a lot of interesting stuff. That when my Uncle Howard passed away, he didn't have any children, and all that stuff came to me. And so I've got quite a few things that belong to the family. And of course, Howard's the one that told me all this stuff about the family that's been recorded. And of course, you've done it, helped us out on that. And Howard didn't talk very loud, and some of his stuff was really hard to interpret, but got a lot of it thanks to Braden. And now it's out there, and people are enjoying it. Looks like too. Mm-hmm. I know Mildred and Orwell's has 104 views. Mm-hmm. And of course, you've written the paragraph explaining what it was, and you really didn't intend to put it out there for everybody to read, but it's of interest. Mm-hmm. It's history.
Mm-hmm. And people are enjoying it.
Yeah.
Because I did try to make it where it was just unlisted links, but for some reason it wouldn't let me share them properly, so I just had to put them out there for the world, but people are enjoying them.
Yeah, and I've passed that along to people because they were interested in it. Mm-hmm. So, but see, my grandfather jumping around, but they were in the run, and up there at Perry, and they not landed, but they staked some land there near Covington, Oklahoma, and they got 60 acres. Well, my grandfather and his brother were just across the road from each other, because they got, this 60 acres. And Uncle Howard took me around one time and showed me where they lived. It was a 2-story house, and going upstairs, you had to go outside the house and go up there. They had a stove, wood stove, and it was at the bottom level, and the pipe went up through, and that's how it was heated upstairs for the boys. Anyway, and I've got this little gun that my Uncle Merle had, the little crackpot 22, and that's how they said that they existed some winters, because one of my aunts said they were eating acorns, and I don't have any reason not to believe her, but that's what she was saying. But Merle would go out and he'd kill a rabbit or a squirrel or whatever, and that's what they would eat. Well, anyway, the boys were upstairs, and of course the dad and mother were downstairs, and one time Grandpa looked out and there was this guy coming up the road, and he was coming towards her house, and Granddad hollered up to Merle, and he said, if he starts up the stairs, you shoot him. And anyway, the guy came around, and he was taking it easy and looking and doing this, and he came around to the stairs, and he almost stepped on the first step, and Merle was watching. And then the guy turned and walked off, and I guess Merle would have shot him, I don't know. My dad tells the story about, they finally had some peanut butter, and this guy came by, and he was wanting something to eat. Well, they fixed him a peanut butter sandwich, and then he got out just a little ways down the road and opened it up and looked at it and just tossed it. He didn't want peanut butter sandwich. My grandmother, I think every other day or whatever, she'd bake 10 or 12 loaves of bread, and that's their main diet, was bread and whatever. It was a different world. Mm-hmm. People think they have it hard now. It was really difficult back in those days. Mm-hmm. My grandfather, well, a lot of the boys are musicians, but my dad wasn't, and let's see, my Uncle Merle wasn't, but most of the other ones were. And Howard would play at dances and whatever, and I don't know, all over him and my Uncle Emery. And talking about Uncle Emery reminds me that they lived back east. I don't know whether it was Ohio or Illinois, whether because my grandmother did too. But my grandfather's brother was pretty rough, and supposedly he either beat a man almost to death or he killed somebody. So they had to leave that part of the world and they came to Oklahoma. Anyway, what's his name? I forget, but he had a fiddle, and he'd made a wooden case for it. And you need to put it in this video. I have the wooden case that the violin was in, and I also have the record from, I forget what the company was that shipped it, but it's where it was actually shipped to him back in Oklahoma. And the violin case, I don't have the violin. My Uncle Howard have it, and he gave it to my Uncle Emery. And of course, Emery had several boys, and one of them's got it now, but I'd love to have had that violin too, but I just have the case.
Yeah.
Okay, this is the violin case I was talking about. It's handmade, and you can see inside it was lined, or partially lined. But anyway, and this looks like tin cans or something where they cut for dividers. And it was lined with that red material. I need to reline it. And of course, I've written a story about how I obtained it on this piece of paper. But it's a pretty good piece of work to be curved like that, and it's got the leather handle, and it made it from back east in Oklahoma. Like I said, I wished I had the violin, but I don't have.
I wish you did too. Somebody could.
Yeah,
Is that still running?
anyway. Stories. We had some tapes that went to see my Uncle Orville and Aunt Mildred in, where they lived, Katy, Texas. And it was 1990. And anyway, Halloween night. And of course it's interesting, the tales that they told. And they went to these nursing homes and they would sing to them, the people there, and entertain them. And of course they were entertaining. I think it was just me at that time, but Patty and I went down too. But anyway, they were so happy that we were there, and they were singing and clapping and doing their thing, and it's very interesting. Like I said, Orville was my favorite, and he says that I was his favorite nephew. But he was a Christian minister, and he baptized the whole family. Not my brother, because he had left home, but Mother and Daddy and I and my sister Donna and me. And my sister Donna Jean, I hadn't mentioned her. She was 4 years younger than me, and my brother was 10 years older than me. And my brother passed away, and he was in his 70s. My wife likes to tell that he was a one-match guy a day. He would sit there at the table, and he had peanut butter and coffee and cigarettes. And he would keep watching his cigarette, and when it got down to about that long, he'd light another one. And about 5 packs a day. But anyway, he was a good guy, a fun guy. We had a lot of fun. But there at the last, he was pretty bad shape. He had like 10% lung capacity, and finally got him. But anyway, it was a lot of good times. We'd get together and play cards and have meals, and it was just fun. Went to a little lake up there in Wichita, Kansas. It was Santa Fe Lake. And Patty and I had bought a 5-horse Evinrude motor, and we'd rent a boat. at Santa Fe Lake, and we'd go up in the stream feeding that lake, and we'd catch crappie. Well, Junior got this big idea. He wanted a boat. So he bought a Chris Craft, which is a nice boat. It was made in Denison, Texas at the time. Real fancy wooden boat. Had a 35 horse Mercury engine on it. And he wanted us to trade our 5-horse Evinrude in on it, and we did. So we could use the boat, and they skied behind it and whatever. And in the middle of town up there, Wichita, the Arkansas River runs through it, and you could boat up there, keep the speed way down. And Junior and I worked on that boat, on the steering, and we got the cables mixed up.
Uh-oh.
So we went out and was driving around on the lake, and we turned around and we was coming back to the dock, and we turned over to this way to go to the dock, and the boat went that way. So we had the cables wrong. You had to go, if you wanted to go to the right, you had to turn to the left. And we finally was able to get the dang thing docked where we could take it home and work on it. But it was cute. So he had a lot of fun with it. And ice cream, my brother loved chocolate ice cream. And every time he'd make it, it had to be chocolate. We had the hand crank back then, but it was good. Their kids were always much bigger than our kids, and usually take them down when they was little babies, but Daddy took care of their kids all the time. And I maybe shouldn't tell this on tape, but Daddy said that every time we go to their house, when you get ready to go to the bathroom, you'd have to take dirty diapers out.
Dirty?
They were dirty. And see, back then you had cloth diapers, and they'd clean them out and wash them and dry them and put them back on the kids. Well, instead of putting them in a container beside the pot, the commode, they'd just drop them in the commode. And so you'd have to sit there and swish them up and down and clean them out so you could put them in a bucket, and then you could use the bathroom. But it was exciting.
He would just go ahead and tinkle right on top of them. The rest of the family did. I couldn't stand it. So I knew when we went over there, I was going to have to clean the bathroom up so I could use the bathroom.
Yeah, there's a funny story. My poor brother, most of that family's gone. Well, there's only one of them left, but every meal, when it come time to have a meal, they had to go to the store and go buy whatever they was going to have, sandwiches or it doesn't matter, whatever.
Because whatever food was in the cabinet, they ate it that day. And if you had a whole bunch, they'd eat tomorrow's and the next day's. And so they couldn't keep tomorrow's food. They had to buy it tomorrow.
Yeah.
And that's the truth.
That's the truth. We're sticking to it.
Oh, goodness. I'd say, why don't you buy more groceries? Bess would say, they'll just eat it up today. And then we won't have anything tomorrow. We'll go buy it tomorrow, so we'll have it to eat. What a life.
Yeah, Junior and Patty worked for Kitty Clover Potato Chip Company there in Wichita, Kansas. He was out on the route, and she worked in the plant bagging the potato chips. And of course, we thought we were in hog heaven at the time. But a funny story, and this is going to back up when I was about 16 years old. Junior I'd go up in the summertime, and I'd go on the route with him. And his delivery truck was like a UPS truck is now. You had the seat, and then that was all. And then you had the well where you'd stand going in and out of the truck. Well, I'd stand over there in the door, and of course the wind would just blow my hair. And Junior said, Dan, we can fix your hair where it's not going to blow. He said, I got some stuff, or we'll get some stuff. And it was Royal Crown hair jelly. And it was what the blacks used to put on their hair. And I had wavy hair at the time. And put that stuff on my hair and set that wave. then I guarantee you I didn't have to comb my hair for a week if I didn't want to. That was the stickiest darn stuff. My hair didn't blow, I guarantee you, but I couldn't hardly get it out either. It was roll crown hairdressing, I think's what they called it. But he'd get me into a lot of things. One of his running buddies was Kenny, and they were going to Lake Carl Blackwell, and I was the driver. Going to go down there and spend a night or a weekend and fish. Well, they'd loaded up with beer and had the cooler, and I guess Junior was driving at the time, but I had the beer back there with me. Of course, he's going along pretty fast. Dan, we need another beer up here, and so I'd give him to them. They stopped at a little joint alongside the road and walked over, and there was a pool table, and they just walked in and broke the table, and the balls went everywhere. And they didn't want to play, so they just went on. We just went on. And I can remember my brother there was a long ramp out to the boat, and he was a metal Coca-Cola case with beer in it and ice. He was walking along, and there was a board that was gone in that walkway, and he stepped in that and went clear down. And it was an interesting event, I guarantee you. Next morning, I got up, and Junior said, "I got to drink a damn beer before I can have something to drink my coffee out of." But anyway, he was a fun guy to be around. And talking about Kenny, after I told about my Junior's son Gary had drowned, and Gary, when he was just a young kid, his brother was playing with the bicycle, turned upside down, and Gary stuck his hand in there and it cut his finger off. And that was how we was going to be able to identify the body. And I was supposed to identify it when they found it. But it ended up, Kenny was there available, and so he identified Gary. I didn't have to. But I did see pictures later on, but it's not a pretty sight after you've been in the water for 3 months. But anyway, all those kids, they've just had bad endings. Dale was the oldest son. Out in California, he apparently was in with some drugs and limousines, and he was killed gangland style. He was shot behind the ear with a .22, and his girlfriend at the time, I don't think it's his wife, but he was in the living room sitting in the sofa when they found him, and then she was in the bedroom. They chased her down and executed her the same way. And of course, that was out in California, so they never found anybody. And the next one was Debbie. She's still alive, just barely. There was 5 of those kids. Danny Ray, he was an alcoholic most of his life, and he passed away. Tommy was the most educated because he graduated from OSU as a horticulturist, and he worked at old nurseries and whatever. He actually ran them. But they got into this different type of religion, and they didn't believe in going to the doctor. It's God's going to heal you or you're going to die. Well, Tommy he had diabetes, and I guess when he finally died, he weighed close to 400 pounds. He was so big that the thing that they lower the casket and the vault down into the grave side, his was so big they had to have a backhoe there to drop it down in, and then his casket, they couldn't use it there either, so the backhoe was what lowered him into the ground. So, but he wouldn't go to the doctor. God was either going to heal you or let you die, and he died.
But he ate too much.
Yeah, he
All the
ate
time.
a lot too. So, but anyway, it was an interesting family, and we had a lot of 8mm tapes or 8mm film back then, because I still have the old camera in here you'd wind it up and we'd take 50-foot reels of movie fields, and of course they're not too good, but we had those converted over to CDs, and anyway, we was wanting Debbie to watch them, and she said that she couldn't. They couldn't see anything like on TV or moving pictures or anything. They could look at still pictures, but they couldn't look at videos. And we made an offer to them. Then later on, they said that things had changed and they were able to witness them or to see them. So I'm glad they were able to enjoy them some, because it's the only record that they had from back when they were kids. But of course, her daughter and her daughter's son, they come by, and he loves to be with me, to come down and do leathercraft. In fact, the last time they were here it was just a day, but we came down and I helped him make a little knife sheath for one of his knives, and gave him a knife, and he really enjoyed that. So I've got some people that are learning various things that I've done through the years, and that's good, because I tell them, when I'm gone, well, that all that talent, and well, not talent so much, but what I've learned has not been passed along. But maybe there'll be some more of them that's interested in doing and of course you have. We've done things together, so belts and the jewelry and whatever. And Cason's had a touch of it with the little silver thing that he made, so it's been good.
And while he made it, he was really proud that he had done it.
Yeah.
I mean, it's like he'd not done anything like that before, and it's like, I can do this.
Yeah, he found out that it's something that he could do, and I think he tried to come back and do some more stuff, but he's so involved with everything else, with FFA and baseball and whatever, it's just hard to get to do anything. But
that's the way it gets. That's the way it gets. You get to my point in life, and everything's planned out by. There was a time a couple weeks ago where everything was planned out in 15-minute sections.
Oh, really?
And, yeah, max free time I had that entire week was 2.5 hours.
I'm going to check to see if he tells the right story.
Well, we're going to build a log cabin, and we went by and saw this, and we wanted this, and decided not to have the cabin. So.
But we went on to Tulsa area and saw the log cabin. It was really nice. But this already had a house on it, but it wasn't the house we live in.
Yeah.
We added on and added on and added on.
Yeah, it's ready whenever you are.
But we,
and I noticed that, and I hadn't done that in a long time. We have some new friends, and anyway, he used the bathroom yesterday. Because he needed to go in there, and in fact, he took a shower because he'd been out working with Dan. He had some clean clothes. And so I opened that door to the bathroom and walked in, and he was right behind me. I said, come on in. Anyway, when I opened that, and it was a big bathroom. It wasn't just a little room.
Yeah.
And it was like, my gosh, this is big. And then later, he showed him where there's the shower and whatever. Anyway, we opened where the laundry room is, the area. And he said, there's more? And I said, well, it's just where the dirty clothes are.
Yeah.
And we have a big clothes closet right there. And he said, this is something else. And I said, well, we just needed room. But he was amazed. Because he'd seen the rest of the house, and of course our living room is larger. But he was not expecting a large bathroom like that. He just was expecting a small bathroom. But it was funny when he went like, oh my gosh.
we had a friend, his name was Gary Ainsworth. worked with him over at Safeway, but he was building log cabins. He called it Triple D Log Cabin Company or whatever, and he'd built one up around Tulsa apparently. So we wanted to see him because we was interested in buying some land over on the other side of the Calera, 100 and some acres, and wanted to build a log cabin on it. So Gary was taking us to Tulsa, and we came by this place, and what she was talking about, saw the sign and everything. And of course the house at that time was 28 by 30, very small, set way up off the road. So we got to talking about it, and just one thing led to another, and talked to the name was Abers, and I think they had like 10 or 12 kids, and they were German. He spoke fluent German. He was an aircraft mechanic, and he had different airplanes, and but they were homeschooling their kids, and the town of Caddo, where the school up there, was one saying they needed to be in school. They didn't need to be homeschooled. Well, Abers had found a drug plane somewhere. It was a 2-engine plane, pretty good sized one, and he wanted to buy it for $7,000. And
they were hauling drugs in it.
yeah,
And so
it
it's
was
confiscated by the law.
Be like
law
ICE or whatever now. But anyway, at the time we didn't have the money to pay all the money down, and so we'd paid some, and was going to pay some later on. And he said, if you'll pay me the rest of the money down, then I'll knock the percent off, whatever he's going to charge us. So we come up with the final payment on down payment, and he was able to buy the plane and fix it up, and they went to Canada. And we, well, were you here when they came? I thought you were.
I was here the day that they
Yeah.
were here.
But
We hadn't heard from him lately.
no, we haven't.
But for a while we were hearing from that daughter.
You know, Eve,
Yeah.
the oldest daughter, came through about 3 or 4 years ago, and it was a man and a woman and a young man. Their son turned out to be. But anyway, she came up and said, don't know if you're the people that bought this land originally from my parents or not, and you know how long you had it. She introduced herself and told who she was, and they said, yeah, we're the people that bought it from your dad. And we had a real long visit and just really enjoyed it. And like Patty said, we communicated back and forth. And come to find out, the kids Dad didn't tell them anything, and so we had papers and made copies of it and gave to her about when we bought the place and the letters that he'd sent us and all that, and she was so proud to get that. And back years ago, only half of this building was concrete floor, and the rest was gravel.
Is he right there?
Yeah, line right there. And anyway, in that gravel was this little Craftsman 1/8 inch screwdriver, and it had been pounded on so much that the metal had come out the back of it, and only that much was sticking out as far as screwdriver was concerned. And I'd kept it 40 years, basically, because we've been here 45 years. Anyway, when she came, I gave that to her, and she was so happy. She said, that's the only thing in my dad's that I have is that screwdriver. Anyway, and then later on, of course, after we bought the place, there was 3 willow trees up here in the front yard. And I was out there around them one day, and I found this pocket knife. It was an inexpensive knife. And I cleaned it up, and I had it all these years. And after we talked about the screwdriver and everything, I told about the knife, and I said I'd send it to them. And they never could figure out whose knife it was, but it had to be one of theirs because, you know, they were the only people that lived here, I guess, for a long time. But
Right, because there wasn't I guess there was this little shed up here.
yeah, we had this building
But
was
there
here.
there wasn't a house on it.
Right, and they moved when the highway went through the bypass, the 4-lane. He somehow moved that house on a trailer, pulling it with a tractor, and up here, and he had his backhoe, And when they, for a water supply, the well out there is only 15 feet deep. He took his back on, he was digging down until he hit water, and at 15 feet he had these 3-foot concrete pipe pieces, and when it struck water he just started dropping them down. So
And
that was the water we
that's
used
just
for
right.
many years.
Right out here close to this driveway.
Yeah.
And he piped it up there.
And they had this, I think the parents must have stayed down here because my shop here in the ceiling has got a place where a stovepipe went through it, and then also above in the roof. So I think they may have stayed down here, and the kids at the house, we don't know for sure. But what they had in the house, there wasn't any kitchen facilities. We had to put cabinets in it later on.
And they had all those kids.
Yeah, they had
But they had the
a big picnic table
a
inside.
big picnic table in there, but they also had the bathroom downstairs. I think that he put the bathroom upstairs. I'm not sure about that, but it may have put that in there, but it may have been otherwise. But they were very creative, and they got by with a little bit of nothing.
Yeah.
To have that many kids in that little house. And the girls slept in the small bedroom on the floor. They rolled their bedding up and rolled it against the floor every night, every morning. Unrolled it so that the girls, I think there was 5 that was in there, 4 or 5 of them, and they slept on the floor. And the boys got the bigger bedroom because there was more boys. Mm-hmm. And they slept on the floor and did the same thing.
Interesting.
And they were happy to have a floor to sleep on.
Yeah.
And a roof that didn't leak.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it was interesting. The house is a story and a half.
Yeah.
It's not 2 stories, it's a story and a half. So there's not a lot of space up there in the top. But there's 2 bedrooms and a bath upstairs. But you kind of have to lean over if you want to use the bathroom up there.
Yeah.
You've experienced that.
Yeah.
Especially as I've gotten taller.
Yeah.
Oh my goodness.
But anyway, when we moved here, it was, like I said, 28 by 30. And I wouldn't guess the size now. First thing we did was built onto the bathroom, because the bathroom was only 5 by, I don't know, maybe 8 at the most, maybe less than that. But you walk in and sit down and use the commode, and then they had a little sink and then a tub, and that was it. And of course, like she said, now we have all that room, but we added on the bathroom and utility room, and then let's see, we had a porch that went clear around.
But now we didn't have a porch on the back. Remember, we just walked out on that little concrete.
Yeah, originally we did.
We didn't have any of the porch.
Had a door going out the kitchen, and now then that's a pass-through window.
Yeah.
And the door's over what we call the computer room. So that was all switched around. And I was trying to think the order our living room added on, me and the boys and brother-in-law Mike and anyway, your dad, not your dad, but your granddad, Opa, built on our living room, which is 18 by 4. The whole length there is 40 feet. Now when people step in, they're surprised to see a 40-foot living room.
Yeah.
But anyway, that was built on, and I don't remember the order. We had a porch leading out of the living room. It had a banister and everything on it. And we ended up having a porch all the way around from the living room clear around to the bathroom. And then we decided we wanted to build in and have a sunroom, so we took that porch area and built it in, and now we have the sunroom, we call it. It's got 12 windows in it, and we really enjoyed that. So we We figure now we got 2,100 square feet of living space, which originally we, 28 by 30s, not much, but it was 2 levels. But anyway, it's been fun, and we've done a lot of building. And this barn, like I said, it was here 28. It's 25 by 50. Of course, put concrete in. And when my dad died in 1988, we did this wall over here and took all of his stuff from his house and made that wall. And that was made an interesting thing. So through the years, her youngest brother had picked up a lot of tools and whatever and had given them to me, and they were in boxes and trunks and whatever. And so we started enclosing all these walls, and you'll have to take a picture of all
putting them
that.
on display.
Yeah, so they call it the museum now.
The barn museum.
Right. We have a friend that she walked in here one time and she said, "Oh my goodness, do you have any idea how much money you've got hanging on this wall?" And I said, "Cheryl, I don't care. I don't. It doesn't matter. It's just things that have meant a lot for the family all these years, and you'll have to record that later." But there's a lot of family stuff here, a lot of stuff that Mike's brought and we've accumulated. And there's some of the old original toys that you put on your TV with, I forget the name of them, but my mother and dad's telephone up there, 856-3504 is what their phone number was when they lived out at the county line, or rather.
Long time ago.
Long
But
time
I think
ago.
one of the interesting things that we put in down here are 2 things. Is that those antlers.
Yeah.
And who had those?
My friend Brian Weibling, he brought them over one time.
He said.
His son had found that in Colorado. And that's a true 6x6, which is the big elk antler. And Brian and I make grips for pistols, 1911 type. And he said he didn't know how many times he'd started out to his shop and was going to cut that up to make pistol grips. And he said, "I'm bringing it over here where I won't be tempted." So he mounted it up there, and so that's how I got that 6x6.
Isn't that something?
His son had been offered $500 for it.
Well, it'd be worth a lot more than that now, wouldn't it?
I imagine so.
Oh my gosh, Dan. Well, but the other interesting thing is this weird thing.
Yeah.
You know what I'm pointing at, Dan?
No. I guess we'll try bicycle or tricycle. Yeah, that's something I couldn't buy, but I can't ride it because it leans to the right, and it feels like my feet are going backwards to try to pedal on the silly thing. No matter what I do.
You know who could pedal it the best?
Hadley.
Hadley. And she rode it out here more than anybody did.
Yeah, she liked it.
She got on that thing and she could pedal it around that circle, semicircle thing there. And just, really pedal.
I almost rode it into the pond out here one day. I got on that sucker, and it just kept pulling right, and I didn't get it stopped. But anyway, it didn't work. Of course, I rode a bike for years, and my little bike's hanging up here too. But I could ride a bike and carry a watermelon or a 6-foot ladder or whatever back and forth.
And now,
I remember being a kid and you riding back and forth on the bike.
Yeah.
tell me this, Dan. How much did you give for that bicycle?
$243. Anyway, it's for sale. Anybody that wants it, buy it.
Well, I don't know about that. It makes a good ceiling ornament, Dan.
Yeah. Brad hung it up there. He had the ladder and he had that sucker by one hand, and
I was actually just thinking the other day, I was like, how in the world did it go up there?
yeah, it was fun. Got a lot of memorabilia hanging over on the wall. There's a unicycle and a pogo stick, baseball bats that the boys had. There's a wooden nail keg. There's
Can you see the medicine cabinet?
yeah, that was her grandmother's.
That hung in my grandmother's bathroom in Davis, Oklahoma. she bought that house after her husband was electrocuted when he stepped off in that puddle of water in one of the coal mines up there in northeastern Oklahoma, and it electrocuted him. And she had 4 children on the ground and 1 in the hangar. And anyway, he was electrocuted, and she got some kind of insurance money or something because he was killed on the job. That she bought a house in Davis, Oklahoma. That was just a little.
Is that the grandma that you would go visit where your dad would hitchhike and y'all ride the bus?
Because my dad's family was in Wynnewood,
Yeah.
and mother's family was in Davis, but they couldn't afford. They didn't have a vehicle other than a tricycle, and so they would go from one place to the other. Sometimes they'd be living with my grandmother in Davis, and other times with my dad's family in Wynnewood, and so they could catch the bus. But he didn't buy a ticket. He bought a ticket for mother and 2 kids because we didn't have Mike they didn't have Mike at that time. And so mother would ride the bus and take 2 kids with her, and dad would hitchhike to Wynnewood where his family lived. And then when they came back, and then the mother would ride the bus with the 2 kids, and they had a wagon, and she carried the wagon with her on the bus. Because when they got off the bus, they put us, Bud and I, in the wagon, and went to where my grandparents lived there. And then when they came back, Dad hitchhiked. He put Mother on the bus, and then he took off hitchhiking to Davis. And he usually he was there waiting on Mother and Bud and I when they got to Davis, because they made all these stops along the road. And Dad hitchhiked and got to Davis before she did. And it was free.
Yeah.
For him. They didn't buy another ticket. They didn't have to buy another ticket. And that's how they traveled.
Well, I hear a train coming, so I'm going to pause this for a second.
Okay, we're down here at the shop talking about different things. Told about my museum, how we obtained this place, and a little bit about the family. I haven't talked about my sister. My sister was 4 years younger than me, and we lived out east of Perry, Oklahoma, and what they call the Voight place, I think it was. It had an upstairs in it, but Mother had us kids at home, and when I found out that my sister was here, well, it seemed like I can remember coming down the steps, and I brought her a little toy of some sort. But anyway, that's how it started with my sister. She was a cute little gal, lively, just everybody loved her. She was 5 foot tall or less, and always dancing around. And Donna had several husbands, but anyway, she was a good gal, and her life ended it sad, but don't want to go into a lot of detail there. But anyway, she and I had a lot of good times together. Like I said, my brother was 10 years older, so wasn't around him very much, but me and my sister were very close. And it was my understanding later, it just broke her heart when I ran off and got married, because she was there by herself, basically, with, of course, Mother and Daddy, but she needed me to be with her, and it was a very hard time in her life, and I felt sorry for her later on. But anyway, we were able to be together and do a lot of things together. She had a lot of health problems and had a real problem with her neck, or number 1, 2 vertebrae in her neck. They were separated, and she had to have major surgery and have a big screw put in and pieces wired together and take a bone fragment from somewhere and put in there and hope it would grow. But anyway, the screw broke and there was a wire in there that held everything together, and that was enough to keep her going. Or she's in pain all the time, but still, she was a trooper and she would keep going regardless. And but anyway, she stayed with us after she had some surgery, and she was in induced coma for 21 days. But she came to our house and she had pain, pretty bad pain. Well, her sister-in-law had access to some gummies, and marijuana is, in the state of Oklahoma, is legal. Anyway, come to find out these gummies had the THC or whatever in there, a little bit. And Donna was staying with us, and she got this package in the mail, and it had gummies in it. She thought, oh boy. So we'd play, three of us together, me and Patty and Donna, play cards, and Donna got these gummies, and she said, these things are really good. And she tried to pass them around. I was hoping Patty wouldn't take one because I knew what was in them. She said, these are sure good. And we got through that evening. The next day I told her, I said, Donna, those things have got marijuana in them. Better just keep them to yourself. And anyway, she couldn't believe it. I'll tell you another funny story about her. She was here, and she came downstairs. She stayed upstairs. She came down and said, Danny, what kind of toothpaste is that you got up there? And I said, Donna, I don't know. And anyway, she had brushed her teeth with hemorrhoid medicine. And she didn't look at it. She just brushed her, put it on her toothbrush and brushed her teeth. And she said, that's the nastiest stuff.
Oh my God.
Anyway, you talk about a dumb blonde. Now she was. You tell a joke, and she was the last one to ever figure out what it was about. She was so much fun, though. And she was messing with it in the kitchen sometime, and she cut the ligament in this middle finger, and she couldn't bend it. She'd have to do this to bend her finger. So every time you'd see her, she had that finger up like this. And I said, Donna, Patty'd always say, Donna, fold your hand up, you're giving them a finger. And she was always doing that, but she never thought anything about it because it just was like that forever. But she had a dog. They called him Cash. He was a little terrier, and that dog meant more to her than any grandkid she had, or kid. When she took a shower, well, he took a shower with her, and she washed his little TT, and just on and on. It was just, that dog was prince of that house, and he would aggravate the little son of a gun. He'd nip at you if you didn't watch him. But anyway, she loved her animals, and always did have animals. When she was home, she had a horse, and she'd ride the horse. And I had a horse used to ride. And a story about me, I can't think of that song. Anyway, I had a horse, and we'd ride, me and my buddies, and this horse that I had, it'd take off galloping along, and once that sucker starts, you better hang on, because she would go on. I was trying to think, The Happy Wanderer, I think's the name of that song. I had a favorite song, and I'd sing that thing as loud as I could sing it, riding that horse and going along. But anyway, just trying to think who sang it. The Happy Wanderer, Frank Weir and his orchestra. Anyway, it was. Can I play it? Braden,
Yeah,
can I
for it.
play a little bit?
Yeah.
I want you to listen to my song.
I love to go a-wandering along the mountain track, and as I go I love to sing, my knapsack on my back. Marie, my knapsack dances in the sun. So joyously it calls to me, come join my happy song.
Anyway, I'd get that old horse to going, and if I can get it stopped, I'd get that horse to going, and well, how am I going to stop it?
You know,
I love to go a-wandering along the mountain track.
there you go.
Anyway, I'd be riding that horse along in full gallop and singing that song. I hope no one heard me, but anyway, that was my favorite song back when I was just a teenager. But we had horses. My dad had Shetland pony, and my sister had a horse that she rode, and I had a horse that I rode. But it was a good life. Don and I, like I said, we really got along good together, and I don't know. She had 5 husbands, I think. But anyway, she'd lived quite a ways off, and then we lived quite a ways off. But when we were in Wichita, Kansas, we was at the train again. She came to visit, and we just had a wonderful time. But she died 23, about 3 years ago, and it wasn't a happy ending for her as far as we know. But she's gone to heaven, and we know that. So, anyways, she didn't get to be buried where she wanted to be buried, but that was a decision made by her daughter. Anyway, we're going to put a memorial out here where we're going to be buried anyway. So. And I hadn't mentioned, we had a granddaughter that we lost. She was 44 years old. Dan Jr.'s daughter, Marty Ann. She's always had epileptic seizures and whatever, and apparently she hadn't taken her medicine the way she should have. She had an epileptic seizure that lasted over 3 hours, and of course it fried her brain. She was dead by the time they got her, I guess, loaded up, because it was over 30 minutes that she hadn't been breathing when they picked her up. But anyway, we lost her, and she gave her life to her organ donor. We know of, I think the list we got was 5 people that saved their lives because of her. So she lives on. Her mother, of course, you know, all of us, but death happens, and we don't like it. We know it's coming, and we just have to deal with it. It's a sad thing, but I just lost a good friend about 2 weeks ago, and Patty lost her brother a week ago, her oldest brother. I don't know. Like I said, we're living on borrowed time. When you're 88 and 86 years old, you're blessed, and I'm especially blessed, and Patty is too. But to be able to come down here and have a fairly sharp mind, and and be able to talk about everything and remember it, and sit here and work on a knife handle or do whatever I do, leather craft. Anyway, the guy was here yesterday, and he was making suspenders, and thank goodness he likes to come and do things on his own, so it allowed me to work on this knife handle. And making a knife handle where you got metal here at the back and you got metal here, so this has got to fit in there perfect if you want to. I mean, to make it look good, you have to make it fit perfect, and I've managed to do this one pretty good. It'll be interesting to see how it turns out, but I've done so many, like I showed that other one, that this is the one we're trying to duplicate here like this. This is a blade that I bought, and then I put the brass here, and then this is ram's horn, which I dearly like to work with. It's so hard and beautiful, and then I put the cylinders in here and put turquoise in them. That's why he wanted his like that. But I prefer the ram's horn over the stag handle, but that's what I had. I didn't have a good ram's horn for this one. But anyway, I've made, I don't know how many knives. I used, not problem, at the time, I was making knives and I'd sell them for like $100 a quarter. And I was carving the blade. I was one of the, back then when I was doing it, there weren't that many people actually doing that. Of course, now everything is CNC and just on and on. You know, they can do things, set the computers up and they're, whatever they use, I don't know. But I was doing it freehand and actually carving in the metal. And I've carved eagle's head, I've carved bear, put their initials in steel, fish, a deer jumping over a log. I put that on a blade about this tall. I've still got that one. I've carved Arizona mountains or whatever those are called out there. I've carved them in a knife blade and sold them. And some of my knives, this friend of ours went to California with Safeway, and he'd have me make knives and send out there, and heck, he'd sell every one I could make. But I'd only get like $100 a quarter for them, so. But wished I had them all back, but I don't have. People bought them. One of the favorite ones that I'd like to have back is I had designed this knife, and I was always interested in the nude female body. Anyway, as far as drawing and features, but I had taken this, it was a knife blade, and then the front portion of it was a side view of a lady, and then I cut out the handle part, and it came from the back of her neck down her body and her bottom, and then down to her ankles, and that was the wooden part of it. So when you looked at it, there was a silver cutout of a lady, and then the handle was on it. And I sold that to a guy in Oklahoma City for $100 a quarter. And I've always said I need to make another one like it. It was really interesting knife. As a result of I was making pipes at one time, smoking pipes. And there was a guy that had a tobacco shop over at the Sheridan Mall. And he had kits in there to make pipes out of. And I bought them. And I made a couple. And he said, what you ought to do is start making these and selling them and all that. So I started making pipes. And they were like everything else. I didn't want to copy everybody else, so I made my own design and whatever. And I made this one, and it was a lady laying back kind of in like it'd be in a enclosed there, like say a cave, and part of her body was in that cave, and then the rest was out, hanging out of it. And I'd carved that, and I always wanted to go to Market Hall and try to get a chance to sell my pipes. Well, in order to sell pipes, you have to have knives or guns, 50% of your display. So what I did was buy blades and put handles on them, and that's how I got in Market Hall. Well, in there was a guy named George Stone, and he was one of the first members of the knife-making guild. And he hadn't smoked a pipe in years, but he saw my pipes, and he said, I'd like to do some trading with you if you would. And that particular one I just described, I traded that for one of the knives of his that I got. One of them was a fighting knife, and the other was a skinning knife. And I still got the label, the price sticker on the fighting knife's $110. But I have, George has since passed away, but I have eBay slips where that particular knife has gone for right at $1,000. And the other one, the Skinner, was the same way. But here's the story. I had made a Mearson pipe for George, and then also one out of pipe briar. And when you make a pipe, you want the the grain of the pipe to go with the stem and then up the bowl. And once you can take a 12-baller block, and if you get that type grain in it, you can get $100 out of it or better because the way the grain is. And I had perfect grain in it, and I left it like that. Well, that's how I got one of the other knives. Well, I saw him, and he had his place of business was in Richardson, Texas, and we'd go down there, and he was complaining about the pipe being too heavy, and so he sent it back with me to redo to send it down. Well, before I got that done, George passed away, so I have the knife that I traded for, and I also have the pipe, which to me means a lot. It may not mean that much to anybody else, but and then the Mearson pipe ended up breaking, and I've got it in here. I need to put it back together. But anyway, I've had a lot of experience, a lot of fun meeting these, and I collect pocket knives. I won't say how many I've got, but it's a bunch. And I've met a lot of professional knife makers. I never was. I made one lock black knife, and it took me about 30 hours to design it and cut it out, because I had to just cut it out with basically hand tools and a file or whatever. And making the back spring where that thing would lock, and when you open the blade it snaps and it doesn't have any give to it. I showed that knife to Lyle. He lived in Russellville, Arkansas. Jimmy Lyle. Anyway, I showed it to him, and he said, "Man, I wish my first knife would have looked that good." So he paid me a good compliment on it, and since then I've got a couple of his knives that were made. But anyway, and then I got those ones of George Stone, and then my ex-sister-in-law, Nancy, was married to Patty's older brother. She married a second cousin. His name was Bob Ogg, and Bob made knives. In fact, I talked to his mother had married Bob, and whatever kin that would be anyway. This Bob, he's got Bob's record book, and Bob had made over 3,000 pocket knives and some fixed blades. But anyway, in his lifetime, his knives weren't the fanciest of knives, but they were built for strong, I guarantee you. You couldn't hardly open the silly things. And anyway, I have two of his knives. One of them, he wanted me to make a ring for Nancy, and we swapped. I got the knife, and he got the ring. And then another one was a guy was using his knife to cut shingles when he was a roofer and to cut shingles. Well, about the third time he sent the knife back to get it refurbished. Well, Bob kept it. He said, "I'm not fixing the darn thing again." So I got the knife, and Max was telling me he knew about it, but he didn't know I had it. But anyway, I met a lot of interesting people, and being able to visit with them. Jim Pugh, he made what they call the African 5. He'd make a knife, and then, well, for instance, if it was an eagle, the guard on the front would be the eagle's claw, and then the back would be the eagle's head. And his wife was a semi-jeweler. She'd put rubies in the eyes and all this kind of stuff. Well, his is a big 5, would be the African 5. That set was worth over $50,000. But now then, you got knives. We go to a show now, and they're a piece of jewelry is all they are. It's amazing what guys have done. Way, way above anything that I could ever do. But I've had fun. Mine are serviceable. They may not be as pretty or as good looking as some of the things that the guys make, but they serve their need. And I'm not the best craftsman, but I do enough to get by. I mean, I don't think I'm the best of anything, but I just do it. My biggest thing is patience. And I will not produce something that's not good. If it has to be started over, I'll start over. But I'm not going to put out a piece of junk. And that's one of my biggest traits, and I tell people one of my best things, what I'm noted for, is being able to fix my own mistakes. I can hide my mistakes usually, but if you're working with carbon steel, you carve a little hunk out and that's it. You know, you've lost it. But like this thing here, I can do that, and if it scratches the metal a little bit, I'll take it back there and buff it out. I can handle that. But there's just some things you can't redo or fix. I didn't mention wood carvings. I've done several wood carvings, including carvings in my hand. I was cut when I was a kid, taking a butcher knife and whacking a cardboard box, and I got a scar from here all the way to the front of that knuckle from that. I jabbed the knife blade clear through this finger. The scar's out here, and then there's one in between my fingers. It went clear through. I've got 6 stitches in this thumb, carving back this way with a chisel, and it slipped and went and cut that. And I tease people. My wife's gynecologist sewed me up, and I told him he left a gap there in the center of those where those 6 stitches were. But anyway, I like to pass out on that one. It was bleeding pretty good, and I'd laid back on the bed. And anyway, just silly stuff like that I've done. But I've had a good life, that's for darn sure. And it's going to be even, it continues to be good. It's a good opportunity to be able to record this stuff. I don't know. It probably won't get, what do they say, Oscar or anything like that. But it's been fun. Braden's been wanting to do this, and I think we've covered lots and lots of stuff. Let's see, I was trying to think. Oh, I know. I decorate tumblers. I have it's better than just a cheap vibrator tool. It's one that what happens on the lesser ones, they strike about 7,000 licks per minute, and the shaft will wear, and so they'll start wobbling. You get a broad line, and I've got a fancy one. And they get too hot after about 30 minutes.
Okay, very good.
Anyway, this one that I have, I can work with it 2 or 3 hours, and it doesn't overheat or anything. And so I don't know how many tumblers I've decorated, hundreds. You name it, and I've tried to do it, or most things I have done. I've done portraits in wood burning or pyrography. I've got a good friend, Wyman Menzer. He's a state photographer for the state of Texas. He and I are good buddies. Text back and forth almost, 2 or 3 times a week for sure. Anyway, he's a great guy and a great friend. I've known him since 2012. He keeps saying I'm the best leather craftsman around. As long as he keeps saying that, I'll take that, because what happens, I do leathercraft for him, and he gives us pictures. And his pictures may be worth $1,000 to $1,500, and of course my projects are worth maybe $100. But I mean, I say this trade work for work. There's no way I can dollar for dollar, and that's what he said. That's fair with him, and it's fair with me. So we have a good mutual friendship, and he's been here before and stayed 3 nights with us, and it's just a very good time. I'd like to see him again, but he lives 4 hours away, and it's hard to get back and forth. But got a lot of good people. I've met a lot of good with the things that I do. I've met so many people, and I got so many friends because of it. And they'll holler at me, and I'll remember. I ran into a guy the other day at the barber shop, and he said, "You remember me?" And I said, "Well, I really don't." He told me his name, and he said, "You made 2 holsters for me." And I said, "Yeah, I remember now." And I remembered his gun. But you know, it's people like that, and they'll say, "You remember that phone case you made for me 6 years ago?" No, I really don't remember it. But since I've made so darn many, you know. I've got photos of, I don't know how many holsters I've made. I wouldn't even dare count, and that's the pictures, ones I've actually taken a picture of, and there's several I haven't, I'm sure. But maybe someday that'll mean something to somebody, all those different ones. I kept a diary for years. I'd write down what had happened today, and it just started one or two sentences, and then it got to where it'd take 30 minutes to an hour just to write it. And I would spend so much time trying to write the diary, I just quit. But maybe Braden will like to have that some days. I've got a whole little firebox full of diaries and things that happen. Hopefully it'll be interesting to somebody, I don't know. But, and I've tried to have a casting record of the jewelry I've made, and like I said, I think I've probably done over 1,000 pieces. I have kept record on my soap making and the pins. I know I've made 440 some of them. But life's been good. I still buy leather and buy pin kits, and I tell people the good Lord's going to let me live till I use all that up, so I just keep buying more. So I'll have a good excuse to live longer. But as long as I can keep coming down here and doing my thing and enjoying life. And I didn't say this earlier, but I retired at 61. I'm 88. I have not regretted not one day, and I don't look back. It's just a wonderful time from that. And I had a good life before then, but I'm saying so many guys will retire and sit on their rear end and they're dead in 3 years. And all I've done is just get better and stronger and doing more things. And like I said earlier, age is just a number. You can look at it. We've had family members that when they got to be 65, they automatically were old. And they knew they was old. So sure enough, they were. But I'm not going to do that. I'm going to keep going, keep this old mind going, and keep these arthritic hands going.
Well, you got any last advice before we run out of time?
Do what now?
Do you have any advice before we run out of time? Got about 2 minutes. Make a video.
Oh, I don't know. I've told Braden some things I can't say here, but some good advice on things. I think just follow like him. He's pretty well picked his own path, and I think the good Lord's going to tell him where to go and follow that. I've told my story, and I think God will lead you if you just ask Him to. And you live a long life and a good life, and I know you're going to have that. And I think all your family, your siblings, from what I see now, they're going to be the same way. So, and we've got Bradley out here, the things that he does, and he's chose his own path, and it's been good. And I think you keep doing that, and yours going to be the same way. God bless you for sure.
Thank you, Paul. Well, about out of time, but we'll have to do it again, get some more videos sometime. But
Well, that's quite a bit.
yeah.
I don't know what else I'd add, but it's like Uncle Howard. He kept, of course, we had a lot of things to go and places to see and everything.
Yeah.
We might go do a scan at the museum sometime and talk about some of that stuff.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah. Sweet.
Be interesting how it comes out, Braden.
I know, I'm excited.